but I suppose it's to be expected. You got Bob Crow earlier on who stood up for his members. There's not really many people in the public eye who, stick up for ordinary people.
Can you think of anyone else?
I can't, no, not really. I don't know Mark Sawatka, but I'm not sure about him.
That's it.
Tommy Sheridan.
Tommy Sheridan, and that's it. All right, Keith, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go to talk to a man who I imagine some people might have, whose name some people might have come up with when I said someone who stands up for the people, someone who says what he really believes in. Let's talk to the Respect MP, George Galloway. Hello, George, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Vanessa.
I hope that you would consider yourself to be a man of principle and a man who isn't dictated to by party or by expectation or by whip either. What about your knowledge of Tony Benn? I mean, how well did you know him?
Well, very well. I was with him since the early 1970s, though my whole family had admired him through the 60s when he was the brightest in a constellation of many stars. In Mr. Wilson's administration, 64 to 70, he was the most brimming with ideas, the most innovative, the most zealous of the white-hot heat of the technical revolutionaries that Mr. Wilson had declared then.
George, it's quite hard because I would like the listeners to get an idea of what sorts of ideas he espoused. What were the ideas that you liked when you were
Concorde is a good example,
right.
Vanessa.
Yes.
Without him, there would have been no Concorde. The hovercraft in the 1960s, one of the great British inventions that would have withered on the vine. If not for the zeal of Mr. Benn,
right,
and the even simple things that seem banal now, which were revolutionary at the time. He introduced postage stamps. He was the Postmaster General that didn't have the Queen's head alone on them. Prior to that, only the Queen could be on the stamps. Suddenly, great British inventors and historical figures and so on. This was revolutionary, believe it or not, at the time.
Yeah.
And Mr. Benn forced it through. His change to the British Constitution, which he single-handedly brought about, whereby he would have been forced to go into the House of Lords as a Viscount upon the death of his father, but he refused and insisted on continuing as a member of the House of Commons. And he managed single-handedly, he did that twice in his life, to change the constitution of the country. And abolished the automatic assumption of the son of a hereditary peer having to succeed to his father's peerage. These things may seem arcane now, but they were very important then. Nobody believed in democracy more than Tony Benn. He believed in democracy in our economy as well as in our institutions. And most people agreed with the first. Or the second, rather. He had to work harder on the first. The idea that workers should have a say in the running of their enterprises, should have a role in the planning of our economy and so on. These were revolutionary ideas, and he pioneered them. So I was with him throughout the 70s. I was the organizer in Scotland of his campaign for the deputy leadership of the party in the early 80s. If he'd won, I would have moved to London to work with him in his office, and I was with him, therefore, for many decades. And I'm here to tell you, he is without doubt in my mind the greatest Prime Minister we never had, the greatest Labour leader that we never had. And he was the kindest, the gentlest, the most honourable, dignified person of integrity that anyone could hope to meet.
Why didn't we ever have him as leader? Why is he the Prime Minister that we never had? Was it because of his greatness in terms of not being prepared to compromise? Was that why he never attained those great heights?
Well, the wind shifted, and the ideas that he represented in the era of Thatcherism definitely took a dip in their popularity. But when I hear Labour figures today saying that, well, I never agreed with Mr. Benn's point of view or his beliefs, but I have to remind them that actually most people in Britain agree with Mr. Benn's principal ideas, from the European Union to the Iraq War, public ownership of the gas and electricity and railway utilities and so on. the great majority of British people, then and now, actually agreed with Mr. Benn's take on these things rather than the prevailing orthodoxy today.
Are there any causes that he espoused or areas that he ventured into that with the sort of unfurling of time have turned out not to have been sensible or right, do you think?
I can't think of one. I would argue I'm more pro-Europe than he, but he was the first to identify the undemocratic nature of the European Union. It was then called the EEC. And he was, I told you, he changed the constitution twice. The first was on the Viscountcy, and the second was on the referendum on membership of the European Economic Community, which he and some others, some unlikely allies like Mr. Powell and Mr. Foote, won. And we'd never had a referendum before. Never. It was out with our constitutional imagination. But he demanded, because of his belief in democracy, that the British people had to have the right to say whether or not they wanted to be in this economic community. He continued to believe that British membership of the European Union was not in our interest. I don't agree with him on that, but who knows? But one thing's for sure, probably the majority of British people agree with him rather than me on that.
Often as we get older, our ideas become more entrenched, and one of our fixed ideas becomes there used to be a better time, a better place, and this is not it. You know, we become fiercely nostalgic, and the rose-tinted lenses with which we view the days of our youth, etc., etc. Somehow or other, Tony Benn managed to escape all of that, didn't he?
He did. He had tremendous faith in young people. I have a picture of him with my baby daughter, herself now a mother of 4, cradling her in his arms as he later did with all of her children. He loved children, he loved young people, took fantastic pride when he heard young people give good speeches from the platforms or the rostrums that we were on. He never got stuck in any kind of nostalgia. He always believed in the future, and I'm sure that he took his last breath believing that the future will be better than the past.
Do you believe the future will be better than the past?
I do. Perhaps not as zealously as Mr. Benn, but he was a fantastic optimist. As things fell all around us and as the world was in flames, he clung to his belief that humanity is essentially good and good will prevail.
Thank you so much for talking to us. That's George Galloway there, the Respect MP. You could hear the absolute respect with which he regarded Tony Benn, and so did Diane Abbott, and so did so many people. And the fascinating thing is, from sometimes entirely opposite ends of the political spectrum. So people admired his conviction and his politeness and his education, the fact that he was so exceptionally informed about the things that he enthused and was inspired by, and his adherence to principle regardless of consequence. We're talking about Tony Benn, who died this morning, and I'd be very interested in taking your calls on him, 0207 224 2000, and straight after this we'll be back with Kay in Epsom. BBC Live.